Hello everyone, Charcoal here. If you know anything about Wings of Fire, you'll know that the first arc focuses on the War of SandWing Succession, during which the three SandWing princesses, Blister, Blaze, and Burn, all made alliances with the other tribes, triggering a nearly 20-year continent-wide conflict to decide who would take the throne. Now, in our world, we have things like the Geneva Conventions to decide what is and isn't considered lawful during a time of war. Obviously, no such system exists in Wings of Fire, but what if it did? Today, I'm going through every queen who participated in the War of SandWing Succession and seeing if any of their actions during the war would get them charged with a war crime. Just a couple issues. I am not a lawyer, nor am I any kind of legal expert, and I don't really know anyone who is. And the Geneva Conventions are fucking long and full of legal jargon that I will never understand. I can't be bothered to read through all of it for this video. Thankfully, the AI language model, ChatGPT, does have knowledge of the conventions, so all I have to do is feed it the story of what each queen did during the war, and talk with the AI along with overriding it with my own judgment here and there to determine what each character is getting charged with. As we've established in the past, ChatGPT is far from perfect, so a lot of the sentences here are probably not accurate. But come on, I'm applying real-life international law to a fantasy dragon world, it's not going to make a ton of sense. And obviously I should acknowledge the current crisis you've probably heard of by now, with Israel committing actual war crimes and genocide against Palestine. This video is not trying to make light of anything happening over there, this is all in good fun. I've left a link in the description to a fundraising campaign called Wings of Fire for Palestine. The actual campaign has ended, but they have loads more educational links and other information that I encourage you all to check out. Alright, that's the heavy stuff out of the way. Without further ado, court is now in session. Our first case is Queen Moorhen of the Mudwings. The first incident on her list is her participation in the Summer Palace bombing, as her forces were involved in the attack, likely under her orders. And the Summer Palace seems depicted as a pretty public area, not specifically a military target. This gets her 15 years in prison for indiscriminate attack on civilian objects. Next, the AI cited that the Dragonets of Destiny expressed that they would not want to be captured by Moorhen, implying that she mistreats her prisoners. But since this isn't directly confirmed, we're not charging her for anything there. It also tried to charge her with espionage for employing a spy to find the Talons of Peace, but I double-checked with ChatGPT and it confirmed that apparently nothing in the Geneva Conventions outlaws espionage, so I'm dropping that charge as well. Lastly, we have her planned attack on the Ice Wings in Book 5. It was stated that she fully intended to wipe out all of them, so even though the attack never actually went through, accounts from her soldiers could still get her life in prison for conspiracy to commit genocide. That leaves Moorhen's total sentence at life plus 15 years. Case number 2 is Queen Glacier of the Ice Wings. First of all, Blaze recounted Glacier once ripping off the wings of a Skywing before killing him. This constitutes mutilation and execution without due process, resulting in 20 years in prison. The next two charges also come from a conversation with Blaze in the Book 4 epilogue. She states that she would kill the Dragonets of Destiny if they didn't choose Blaze as the next SandWing Queen, which counts as threatening to take and kill hostages, so that's another 15. In that same conversation, Glacier stated she'd have no problem wiping out all of the Nightwings. Since this was only stated in conversation with no official declaration made or mobilization of troops for this purpose, we're only counting this as threatening genocide rather than conspiracy to commit genocide like Moorhen. So instead of a life sentence, Glacier gets 25 years for this, bringing her total to 60 years inside. Case number 3, Queen Coral of the Sea Wings. First, during Book 2, Coral openly threatens her former soldier Webs for abandoning the kingdom, stating it, quote, wouldn't be a quick death for him. This gets Coral 15 years behind bars for the charge of threatening torture and cruel treatment. ChatGPT also tried to get her for unlawful imprisonment of Webs and Riptide, but they did technically desert their kingdom's army for the Talons of Peace, so Coral imprisoning them and threatening execution for that would actually be legally justified, since desertion during wartime is punishable by prison time or technically even death, in the United States at least. So that particular charge is ignored. But we can get her for unlawful imprisonment of the Dragonets of Destiny near the end of Book 2, and cruel treatment for the electric eel cage in the dungeon. Coral gets 10 years for this. How that is somehow considered less severe than threatening cruel treatment, I have no idea. That's probably not correct, but it's what ChatGPT said. Next, the AI cited Coral killing Tortoise for failing to protect the royal hatchery. Is that murder? Absolutely. But is it a war crime? Not exactly. This was related to Coral's personal issues, not the War of SandWing Succession, so we're not counting this one. And lastly, we have one of the countless examples of her utter failure as a mother, pressuring an enemy to use her magic to further her own goals in the war. This will net her another 15 years for coercion and abuse of power, bringing her final total to 40 years in prison. She absolutely deserves more if you ask me, but again, I'm not a lawyer. Case number 4, Queen Scarlet of the Skywings. We're having a field day with this one. First up is her Gladiator Arena. Right off the bat, Scarlet gets life in prison for unlawful imprisonment, torture of prisoners, and forced combat. Next is her deceit and coercion of Peril. Peril never directly fought in the war, but I think we can count this because Scarlet essentially made Peril into a torture device for prisoners of war. 20 years for psychological manipulation and coercion. And we can add on another charge of false imprisonment for the Dragonets of Destiny, displaying glory as art, etc. 15 years for unlawful imprisonment and degrading treatment. Lastly, we have Scarlet blackmailing Kestrel into killing her baby, then threatening to kill her other baby. The AI tried to charge her for threatening to execute Kestrel, but again, Kestrel deserted, which is punishable by death, so we can't technically hold that against Scarlet, even if she is awful for it. But we can give her another 15 years for coercion and threatening execution of the children. That leaves her total penalty as a life sentence plus 50 years. Case number 5, Queen Ruby of the Skywings, who is actually the only dragon we're going over today who is pretty much clean. After ascending to the throne following her mother's disappearance, Ruby pulled back on all fronts of the war, wouldn't listen to Byrne's demands for violence, and turned the arena into a hospital. The only thing she might be charged with is participating in the Summer Palace bombing, which would get her 15 years for indiscriminate attack on civilian objects like Moorhen, but since it's never actually confirmed that she directly gave the order, we don't have enough evidence to convict her of anything. Ruby gets out of her trial scot-free. Case number 6, Queen Battlewinner of the Nightwings. Her list is a little smaller since she didn't actually do much besides planning. First up is the false prophecy, which we can count as psychological manipulation, which led to even more death and suffering. 20 years for that. The only other thing is her intention to invade the Rainwings. The attack was never officially carried out, but the planning process is enough to give her 15 years for preparation for an indiscriminate attack on civilians. The AI originally wanted to bump it up to 30 years for including the usage of inhumane methods of warfare in the form of her planned lava armor, but since that's not really a weapon she'd be using on the Rainwings, I'm not counting it. This makes Battlewinner's total sentence 35 years in prison, which shouldn't be too hard considering she ended up encased in ice anyway. I'm breaking the rules a bit with case number 7, Morrowseer of the Nightwings. He's not royalty, but he was essentially the active Nightwing ruler in Battlewinner's place, and aside from the SandWing sisters, Morrowseer can be considered the villain of the first arc, so let's look at his list. First up, he also gets 20 years in prison for devising the fake prophecy along with Battlewinner, we just went over that one. In the Skywing arena, Morrowseer has his team of Nightwings murder the Icewing prisoners upon his arrival. This gets life in prison for the massacre of prisoners of war. Next, he worked with Blister to orchestrate the murder of Kestrel. This gives him 15 years for conspiracy to commit murder. And lastly, we have cruel treatment of the false Dragonets of Destiny. He even ordered them to kill Starflight at one point. For the torture and inhumane treatment of children, Morrowseer has landed himself with a second life sentence, bringing his final total to 2 life sentences plus 45 years. The worst one so far. Case number 8, Princess Blaze of the Sandwings. Her first charge is offering Sandwing territory to Glacier in exchange for military support, which can be considered a form of pillage. 15 years in prison for that. Next, the AI mentioned that Blaze had been the target of multiple assassination attempts, and she can be considered to be contributing to the violence by failing to take any measures to prevent them. This is mainly due to her being a blissfully unaware, self-centered dumbass, but ignorance is no excuse. 10 years imprisonment for, and I quote, failure to prevent or report assassination attempts contributing to ongoing violence. Since Glacier did most of the dirty work for Blaze, this is actually where her list ends. 35 total years behind bars. Case number 9, Princess Byrne of the SandWings. Right away, she killed 2 of her brothers, Scald and Singe, just for being annoying, but in a similar vein of Coral killing Tortoise, this isn't directly related to the war. So while she would absolutely get life in jail for 2 counts of fratricide, we can't really count it for this video. We can, however, count her brutally killing Vider and the Skywing Dragonet of Destiny egg, giving her a life sentence she can't dodge for the use of extreme violence and murder of non-combatants. In the third winglet, Deserter, we see Byrne cripple Dune's injured leg just to intimidate Six Claws into obeying her, so she's getting 10 years for maiming somebody. Her next charge is for imprisoning and mistreating Queen Scarlet to keep her safe. Did you hear those air quotes? Another 10 years for unlawful imprisonment and cruel treatment. Jumping back on the murder train, Byrne joins the list of people who plan to kill the Dragonets of Destiny, so that's another 15 years for conspiracy to commit murder, not that it particularly matters anymore. Byrne's final sentence is life plus 35 years. And case number 10, Princess Blister of the SandWings. And right off the bat, telling her story already triggered ChatGPT's usage policy warning, so you know this is going to be good. First up, she killed Kestrel. You all knew this was coming, 20 years in prison for premeditated murder. Her next victim was Webbs, but since he survived, that knocks it down to only attempted murder, and poisoning through the use of her tail. 15 years for that. And Blister is also a passenger on the Let's Kill the Dragonets of Destiny Express, so tack on another 15 for conspiracy to commit murder. And we can't forget the Dragonbite Vipers, so that's the murder of Burn, not to mention with poison, and even more poison because Clay got bit. That's gonna be another life sentence for Blister. And finally, the attempted murder of Blaze, one last dose of 15 years, bringing Blister's final sentence to 2 life sentences plus 45 years in prison. Worse than even Morrowseer. We're almost done, but first, bonus round, Queen Glory of the Rainwings. Since we counted Battlewinner and Morrowseer's actions against the Rainwings as part of the larger SandWing War, it's only natural we look at what Glory has done as well, and her list is surprisingly extensive. First off, killing Fjord in Scarlet's arena. This counts as murder of combatants outside of actual military combat, which will get her a life sentence already. I honestly was not expecting this. Next, venoming Queen Scarlet, 20 years imprisonment for attempted murder and causing grievous bodily harm. Third is when she attacked 3 Nightwing guards during her imprisonment on their island. The AI called this inhumane treatment of prisoners and tried to give her 30 years for it. First of all, the crime doesn't make sense because Glory was the prisoner here. More accurately, it would be attempted murder causing grievous bodily harm. But keep in mind, Glory was not queen yet, and even though the Nightwings were kidnapping Rainwings, Queen Magnificent was still actively refusing to get the tribe involved in any way. So the Rainwings were not officially at war with the Nightwings yet, meaning this charge has to be dismissed because it was not technically committed as part of a war. Next is a smaller one, simply threatening Princess Greatness with venom to take her to Queen Battlewinner, 10 years for threatening violence to coerce. And lastly, her treatment of Mastermind after the whole conflict ended. She never had a proper prison built until Darkstalker showed up, so she just kept Mastermind in a pit of quicksand 24/7. This gives Glory 15 years for cruel treatment of a prisoner, bringing her final total to life plus 45 years. Now, of course, all of these characters are dragons who live significantly longer than humans, so to compensate for their longer lifespans, I'm going to take their sentences and give them a 25% increase. Now, going from least severe to most severe, Ruby is innocent, Blaze gets 31 years in prison, Battlewinner gets 44 years, Coral gets 50 years, Glacier gets 75 years, Moorhen gets a life sentence plus 19 years, Burn gets life plus 44 years, Glory gets life plus 56 years, Scarlet gets life plus 63 years, Morrowseer gets 2 life sentences plus 44 years, and Blister gets 2 life sentences plus 56 years. Wow. You might be wondering why none of these characters were given the death penalty, even though some of them definitely deserve it. The simple reason is that the death penalty doesn't really exist under international law. If they were tried by the individual kingdoms, I'm sure several of them would be more than happy to execute a few of these characters. But we're dealing specifically with the Geneva Conventions here, so no death penalty. This was a pretty fun video, but that's all I've got for now. Thank you for visiting Charcoal's Den, and I'll see you all in the next video. Special thanks to my supporter on Patreon. If you want to support the channel, you can pledge at the link in the description for perks such as your name in the credits and early access to new videos.